Welcome to Windows on the World. Now, following our show on the Amazon book ban, we're going to talk about what's happened to songwriter and performer Alison Chabloz. Now, Alison had been reported to police in 2015 by the Campaign for Antisemitism for tweets that she'd made. Alison's also written several songs, including Survivors, which is a bitingly satirical song about Holocaust survivors. Now, this was uploaded to YouTube in Switzerland and is now the subject of a court case originally brought as a private prosecution by the Campaign for Antisemitism. Now, the case has now been taken over by the CPS, and the Campaign for Antisemitism have caused Alison a lot of trouble. They've contacted venues she was performing at, and she's basically lost her livelihood. Alison also wrote a song about the harassment from the Campaign for Antisemitism, and a court summons arrived referring to her song Survivors. Now, it was brought under Section 127A of the Malicious Communications Act. Now, this ties into recent propaganda from Amber Rudd that's been in the newspapers about internet providers being responsible for policing their customers, and of also WhatsApp and other communications which people are communicating on, basically in encrypted messages. So this is a very big thing and maybe part of a bigger picture. Alison was never actually charged with any offence. So we're going to ask, where is the injured party? Where's this going? And is a precedent being set? So Alison, you join me in Windows on the World. You've been rather hounded, haven't you? And just tell me first of all how this sort of started, because you wrote this satirical song Survivors, but it started out with tweets that you'd made. Were these tweets satirical as well?
Yes. The harassment that I've suffered from the campaign against anti-Semitism was preceded by the harassment from another pro-Zionist organisation called Yad B'Yad UK. I was fired from one job. In fact, just to explain, I was campaigning on behalf of the Palestinians for the pro-Palestinian Free Palestine campaign on Twitter when I started to understand what was happening in that region. And I was working... I used to work in Switzerland, and I decided I wanted to come back to my country. And in fact, I started working as a cruise ship musician. And I was sacked from one job via harassment from this first pro-Zionist organisation, Yad B'Yad UK, and Eye on Antisemitism, they're called now, I think. I simply responded to one of their tweets which claimed that if you wanted to go and see a nativity play in Israel at Christmas time, then you needed to take a gas mask with you because there were terrorists everywhere that were willing to blow Christians up, etc. But the person responsible for this organisation claims to be from an Israeli family, so I simply said, well, Israeli Jews now believe in Jesus and the nativity, hallelujah, saved at last. And this person complained to my employer, and I was sacked from one job. I didn't end up taking legal action against them. My union was very wishy-washy, but at the time they did advise me to report to police, which I did. And the police advised me at that time to write this person a cease and desist letter. In fact, it was worded by Derbyshire Constabulary themselves. They worded this letter. I sent it, the person received and signed for the letter. This didn't really change anything. She continued to target my postings online, target my livelihood, etc. But police then refused to take any further action, and I was told by a different set of officers that I'd been wrongly advised, that I shouldn't have entered into any kind of correspondence with this person. But then I was at the Edinburgh Festival in 2015, and I had a full run of shows. These were satirical songs, political songs, but nothing to do with the Holocaust, nothing to do with Israel. And this same organisation, Yad B'Yad UK, also tried to have my show pulled in 2015. I'd been very transparent with the organisers at the beginning, saying, yes, people are calling me an anti-Semite, a Holocaust denier, I've already lost one job. Are you sure you want to be associated with me as an organiser? Are you sure that you want your venue to be associated with me? Oh, don't worry, Alison. this is the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. It's for radical artists. We guarantee your free speech. 10 days into my run of shows, I had a call from the same organiser saying, just to let you know, we've had several letters of complaint about you. People want to pull your show. We can't tell you who it is for data protection, but it was very easy, clearly, to guess what happened. And I thought, okay, thank you very much for this information. I must in some way respond. Any publicity is good publicity. So one night after my show, it was a lovely evening in Edinburgh, I went onto Princes Street, view of the castle behind, view of Edinburgh Castle, and I did this, which is a canal salute invented by the very famous now worldwide celebrity comedian, French comedian Dieudonné.
Could you explain to the viewers what exactly that is? What that means?
Yes, it's an anti-establishment gesture. This comedian has been targeted by the Israel lobby for a number of years now. He's made sketches where he also satirises the Holocaust and the Jewish perception of their exceptionalism, etc. So this gesture just basically means you to anybody who's been annoyed, who's annoyed me. That's what my gesture was that, and this led to my name appearing a couple of days later in the Times of Israel. Big photo, not of the Cronel itself, but of me playing the guitar. There were lots of articles in the Jewish press, nothing in the mainstream, but in the Jewish press and in the far right press, Stormfront, etc. And from then on, I became involved with the French side of revisionism and French nationalism, and that lasted for about a year. But from that day, from my canal appearing, I have been targeted by the campaign against anti-Semitism. Before my canal, I'd never even heard of this organisation, but since that day, every day, without fail, there would be somebody from their organisation under the guise of an anonymous Twitter account targeting me, targeting my gigs, targeting people who interact with me.
Well, surely we have anti-stalking laws to stop that kind of thing, don't we?
Yes. I also began to receive anonymous posts addressed to Mrs. Holocaust denier and innumerable death threats. For example, on my WordPress blog, why don't you jump in front of a train before somebody pushes you? This kind of thing. You'd always be better looking over your shoulder.
See, the thing is, if any MP in this country, because they're all whinging about being abused on Twitter now, if any of them had brought this up, it would have gone to the police and they would have made a big thing out of it, you see. But the problem we've got is, as you've found out, that these lobbying groups are incredibly powerful. So really, this is almost like, I would call that organised gang stalking. It fits that description from what you've said.
Yes, and quite right. It's double standards, utterly double standards. After my show was banned in Edinburgh, and I got more death threats thanks to this targeting of me daily by the campaign against anti-Semitism. The police. The policeman in charge of the investigation rang me one day and said, "Oh, Mrs. Chabloz, we are widening the investigation now to include this targeted harassment online." It was very clear that the campaign against anti-Semitism under these anonymous trolls was responsible for having my show pulled the following year. They had...
Sorry, which year was this?
This is in 2016. This is
last year.
This is last year, jumping ahead. I think you mentioned at the beginning, I was reported to police by one of their members at the end of 2015. That would have been for tweets because I hadn't at that time written any of these controversial songs. So yes, this police investigation followed through from January 2016, but they didn't find anything. They didn't find any evidence. I also received birthday cards and Christmas cards unsigned with happy birthday to the dog, things like this, unsigned with a sticky label on the front. There were no fingerprints on these cards. Somebody had taken great care not to leave any traces of DNA. They couldn't find who'd sent me catalogues for reinforced doors and blinds, even though there was an email address linked and sent to the company that I received these catalogues. I mean, that's all quieted down and stopped now. But yes, 2016 I had another show. I decided to go back to Edinburgh at the last minute. Rather the last minute, there was nothing publicly in the Fringe programme this year, but there were several venues who were interested in sponsoring me for a show because it's groundbreaking musical comedy. These songs, nobody had ever written anything like this before. And I think it's important to say that these songs, I wrote them as a response to the abuse and the targeting from these Jewish organisations. And let's say it as it is, they're Zionist and they're Jewish organisations, very wealthy with connections to the Home Office, to the Prime Minister. I wrote these songs as a response to this abuse that I'd suffered since about 2012. I could have responded by just shutting up. That's what they want, ultimately. That's their ultimate
Well, you could have
aim.
taken a leaf out of a certain book and played the victim, you see.
I could have done this.
You could have
as
done
well.
that, but you didn't, did you?
I could have abused them in the same way that they abused me, but I thought, no, I'm going to respond in the most effective and the most elegant way that I know and what I was trained professionally to do, and that's write music. And as soon as I began to post these songs, which I must stress as well were inspired by another gentleman of Jewish heritage, the son of the famous violinist Yehudi Menuhin, Gerard Menuhin. He'd sent me some lyrics, and I'd already got the idea of the first song, but there are 5 of these songs now, and I wanted to do a little show in Edinburgh, a 45-minute show of these songs, and to tell my story. But the campaign against anti-Semitism again managed to have my show pulled. So at that moment, my new strapline was "Too Fringe for the Fringe." And in the month following Edinburgh, in September, I was given the opportunity to perform at the London Forum at the Grosvenor Hotel's Forum for Nationalists, right-wing identitarians. I got a standing ovation. People laughed, the audience, they laughed all the way through my songs. I met Dr. Nick Colostrom that day, and many other people. The campaign against anti-Semitism weren't too happy about that. I was a bit full of myself. I have to, so after 5 years of being targeted, suddenly to have this kind of recognition is it's very rewarding. And I became perhaps rather big for my boots on Twitter and ended up having my Twitter account suspended. I lost a lot of followers. Yes.
Did you carry on with these tweets to Jewish organisations or something?
No, I wasn't. There was very little interaction, in fact. They were all blocked. These anonymous accounts would use a separate account to come and spy on what I was doing on Twitter, what I was saying, who I was talking with, and they would come and troll. They would make screenshots and continue to troll and stalk and harass in this way. Baiting and entrapment, I think, is the correct term. And I did see one of my accusers' name appear on the Twitter timeline and said, I'd pay good money to see a rope around that troll's neck. At that moment, for me, he was an anonymous troll. I knew that he was tied into the campaign against anti-Semitism. I had my Twitter account closed down. I reported again to police because I'd received more anonymous posts. And a couple of weeks after sending this evidence and another anonymous birthday card, I think it was, I got an email from the sergeant investigating the case and said, "Dear Mrs. Chabloz, your case is now closed. If you wish the police to open another investigation, then you'll have to send more evidence as well as making a statement." And at that point, I just thought, there's not much point in continuing. I'm just going to now. I've found my place. I've found my audience, if you like. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, and the police have been absolutely no help whatsoever. I don't
What
really
do you
trust
think
them.
their opinion of all this is? Because do you think it's because they can't be bothered with it?
Well, I think I'm not really sure. I think there's political pressure. In a case like mine, there has to be political pressure, like you were saying about Amber Rudd, with this the government, the Prime Minister claiming that the government is going to implement this international definition of anti-Semitism. I'm not quite sure how the justice system is going to be able to apply this definition, but I think the ultimate aim is to the ultimate aim of the Israel lobby here is to set a legal precedent in the UK which effectively outlaws Holocaust denial, Holocaust revisionism, as is the case in so many European countries already. Once this is set down in UK law, under this Malicious Communications Act, then of course they'll be able to go after all kinds of people, Dr. Colostrom included. And then they will go for North America. They need this to be able to keep onto their myth of the Holocaust, to be able to ensure that Israel can continue as the hub of international crime for Zionism.
Well, the thing is that with this shutting down of everything, this is playing a big part of it now. But this new definition of anti-Semitism is something that I've covered, and I've written a rebuttal to it, a legal rebuttal, because where all this stands in law is very interesting. We're going to take a short break. We'll see you in a couple of minutes. Welcome to Windows on the World. I'm Mark Windows. Now, over the years, we've put out a lot of information. The Windows on the World show has run for several years now. We've exposed corruption, found solutions, and put out some very useful information on many subjects since we started doing this. This includes, of course, the bigger picture, along with well-researched history, science, and, of course, health matters, which we also cover. Now, our initial website was landofthefree.co.uk, and this was set up to fight the corporate courts, rogue bailiffs, and the unlawful actions of public officials. I and many others have successfully fought criminal bailiff companies and won in court against dishonest councils. This information is all still available. The journalistic integrity of Windows on the World is very important, and we tried to put out information that's forensically accurate and simplistic as possible. So we try and put everything out in a very easy way for people to understand, because over the years there's been a lot of misinformation and disinformation, especially with where people stand within the law, and it's got a lot of people into trouble. So we've always stayed on the right side of the law, but being able to empower people to go into court and do the right thing, that's very important to us. Now, I put this information out to the public because I feel it needs to be there. And even within so-called alternative media, there is much information which is misleading and incorrect. In fact, all the things the now ridiculous mainstream media accuses the alternative media of, there are people putting out stuff that's very, very unhelpful, and we try not to do that. So we accept no funding from anybody and are completely independent. And it's now increasingly necessary that we get some help to fund what we're doing. We're looking for sponsors from self-employed small business sector, which, as we know, is being destroyed. And we cover this a lot on the show with the plans for regeneration, the soaring business rates, and the destruction of what we used to know as our environment, because we're finding that people now are being pushed out and socially engineered from the places that they need to be. We'd also like to appeal to individuals who might be able to donate. Now, the donate button on the site, you can just scroll down to the bottom of the page, and it's also on every article and every video on the site, on windowsontheworld.net. Now, I've never asked for any donations before, but things are getting a bit tighter for us, and we want to carry on and expand what we're doing. That's the most important thing, to expand what we're doing and be able to bring you much more information, which is very difficult at the moment because there's just a few of us. So, the bottom line is, if you can spare a few quid and enjoy what we're doing, press the donate button. We'll be very grateful. And if there's anybody out there, small businesses, who benefit from the sort of information that we put out, and we know there's quite a few because we've been contacted by them, if you'd like to make a small contribution or help out in any way, we'd be most grateful. That's the end of that, and we'll see you soon on Windows on the World. Welcome back to Windows on the World. I'm talking to performer and singer Alison Chabloz about her court case, which is very interesting. So, welcome back, Alison.
Thank you.
Now, we talked a bit about the background of this, and really, in a way, you've been a victim of harassment. That came out in the first part of the show. But you've also written songs which are provocative, to say the least. So you did this really, are you saying you did this in response to the harassment from certain lobbying groups?
Yes,
really?
I was provoked.
Yeah,
for sure. But any artist, when we feel strongly about something, then we have a need to express ourselves. And
the thing I would say is that the information you've put out there is already available on YouTube. There are documentaries made about people who participated to The Last Days, the Spielberg documentary, who have since been proven to be stretching the truth here and there, to say the least. So really all this stuff is out there. I suppose because you'd provoked them before, they brought this court case. This is what I can't understand, and people out there will have difficulty understanding, is why has it gone to court? Because if it was originally just a private prosecution and has now been taken over by the CPS, I mean, what do you think this is about?
Well, like I said before the break, it's about setting a legal precedent which will effectively outlaw any criticism, ultimately any criticism of Israel, and certainly any questioning of the Holocaust, and to bring a similar legislation as there are in so many other European countries regarding these subjects.
Yeah, what I really meant by that was in a wider view, is what that means to generally with these statements being made by people like Amber Rudd and on the back of terrorism, that we have to monitor and police things like social media, and internet providers have to get involved and be responsible. So they're going to be policing their customers. In other words, so if an internet provider doesn't like what you do, they'll kick you off and you'll be blacklisted and never be able to get an internet account. That's the sort of thing that I meant by a wider picture, because I can't see what this is about unless it's part of a bigger picture now. Have you thought about that, though? Is that something that's occurred to you?
But I think that's unrealistic.
Yeah.
The powers that be would love to be able to implement a military term. Full spectrum dominance can be done as a military thing, but also psychological warfare and communication warfare. It's too late for that in the age of the global open source information. It's too late. It's unrealistic, and people will start to be worried about this, and they will resist this kind of control over their private communications. It's just not on. It's completely undemocratic. In a free, democratic society, where are we here? We're in North Korea, China. Where are we? No, we're supposed to be in the free, democratic, liberal West. But suddenly our private communications, the government is threatening that they will be able to look into everything that we write and say. I think it's unrealistic, and Mrs. Rudd, another Zionist doormat, unfortunately, no, I can't see that happening. Certainly, I can't see it happening without a big fight back from the British people.
Well, these people are pretty despicable, really. I mean, the things that they're saying, they're going against all the things that we should be standing for.
Yes.
And that's the problem. So let's go into the court case now, because I think people might find that a little bit confusing. I did, really, because it started off with the complaint.
Yes.
No charges were brought against you. Can you just give us a bit of an update on how it's gone and what the timeline is so far?
Yes, the campaign against anti-Semitism listed this private criminal prosecution for malicious communications against me at the beginning of November. And I found out via one of their another anonymous internet account used by somebody very high up at the campaign against anti-Semitism, who runs a Discus account called Robber's Dog. And people who use Discus and who are often on Spiked online, the supposed free speech mouthpiece, will have seen this man's posts, this person's posts. I was arrested. This private prosecution was listed private, no charges by the CPS. The CPS weren't interested. But the day after this private prosecution was listed, I was arrested, not for this malicious communications. I was arrested on suspicion of 2 charges of harassment, perhaps 3, I don't know. And there were two people cited who claim that I've been harassing them when, in fact, the opposite is true. And one of these people is the same person who'd received the cease and desist letter worded by police, ironically. I was street bailed to the next day, and when I went for my police interview, which I've since found out it wasn't a really lawful arrest. They wanted me there for an interview under caution. I refused. I said, "You've just closed this investigation," because I'd been receiving these death threats.
So they closed so let me just get this right. They closed the investigation down completely,
yes.
And then they wanted you to voluntarily go to a police station to be
Yes.
cautioned?
Yes.
Which means you accept the offence?
To be interviewed under caution. I refused. I said, no, if Derbyshire Police, after having closed your investigation, you consider that I've committed a crime, then you must arrest me. The officer arrested me, and the next day I went in for this interview under caution. There was a duty solicitor there. I was interviewed for about an hour and a half. The duty solicitor said there's absolutely no evidence of any crime having been committed, none at all, because I was arrested on a further charge of harassment of another person, plus arrested on suspicion of inciting racial hatred for my canal salute, which had been 15 months earlier. And I was also questioned about my songs, and I've told the police officer what I've been telling you this afternoon. The solicitor said, no, there's always a good case for say no comment, but you tell them your story, which I've done. So that's one case aside. But I didn't know at that time when I was arrested that this private prosecution had been listed against me. That summons came a few days after.
Right.
And I rang my solicitor here in London, and he said, oh, it's a private prosecution. The Attorney General hasn't given the go-ahead for the Crown to prosecute you. It's a private prosecution. These are extremely rare and extremely expensive. I said, yes, but I was in Switzerland when I uploaded these songs. But anyway, we went ahead. There was a first hearing on December the 15th, and we asked for an adjournment so that the CPS could consider, review the case, and eventually discontinue it, because clearly, with what I've explained before, it's malicious. It's a malicious prosecution. But the judge on that occasion, I can't remember her name, she didn't agree to an adjournment. She immediately set a trial date, and she gave the CPS 15 days plus another 15 days, because it was Christmas and New Year, to review and consider. I was granted unconditional bail at that hearing. Prosecution were very upset, very, very upset. They dragged me back to court the day before Christmas Eve to have me gagged, and that was by Chief Magistrate Emma Baroness Arbuthnot. I cannot mention the names of the private prosecutors. I cannot refer to them. I cannot post anything racist, partly or wholly racist or anti-Semitic online, or anything that is grossly offensive. That's infinitely subjective. What one man might find offensive, another man will find hilarious. So how they would enforce these bail conditions, I don't know, unless I was to say something obviously exceedingly insightful. No, that's not the right word. Inciting.
Yeah, well, it's a very ridiculous kind of situation, because
it's absurd.
that would put most of the population in your shoes.
Yes.
In some form or other,
wouldn't it? You just have to go to football on Saturday afternoon. And take
it all comes back to this idea of, have we got the right not to be offended? And no, we haven't under any kind of law. We haven't got the right not to be offended, because how you feel about something is irrelevant. It's not a legal argument.
In a free and democratic society, we must be free to be able to insult and ridicule anybody. That's the basis of democracy. Free speech is the wellspring of democracy, and the fact that free speech, there's this crackdown on free speech with the collusion of the police and the Crown Prosecution Service, well, I find that particularly offensive. I've been taught, and I'm sure it's the same for you, Mark, I was taught since I was a child, My grandfather died as a British soldier in 1940, bombed to bits by the Luftwaffe, that he died so that we have these freedoms. And now the people that my grandfather was supposed to be defending back then are trying to take these freedoms away. The same group, the same tribal group. It's
well, it's very interesting, yeah, because
wholly offensive.
My grandfather was bombed, and he ended up in a lifeboat with 12 dead bodies, and he was never the same again. But we're not allowed to talk about this stuff. We haven't really got the right to bring this up, you see, because, well, they were just collateral damage of the crown. When it comes into this religious idea, it becomes totally different, and that is completely wrong. But give us just a quick overview now of where the case is going.
Finally, on March the 7th, the Crown Prosecution Service announced that they were taking over the trial and taking over the case and would proceed to trial. Because the case wasn't adjourned by the first judge, the CPS, if they did take over, which is now the case, would be obliged to try and bring this this case to trial. The trial should have been last Friday. On Wednesday, I heard from my solicitor that the prosecution, because we'd submitted our argument, I'd been in Switzerland, you don't have jurisdiction. The Crown now wants an adjournment because of these new factors, and the Crown is also talking about bringing 2 more charges under the same Malicious Communications Act, 127.
Can you tell us what the charges are then? That's quite important.
Well, the 2 new charges are one for the same song and for a second song. These charges concern a blog post that I shared on the 28th of September last year of the London Forum video of my performance at the Grosvenor Hotel last September. So there's my performance, it's the whole show. I speak in between there are 5 songs. They're all revisionist in some respect, but these 2 songs now, which are now the object of these supposed charges, are revisionist survivors. We've talked about that. There's another one, the name is Nemo's Anti-Semitic Universe, but Nemo is one of these campaign against anti-Semitism anonymous trolls. So how the prosecution is going to bring any charges for this, I look forward to explaining how I was provoked into writing this song if the trial goes ahead. Now there's been the trial has been adjourned until June 23rd for legal argument only, and depending on the decision taken that day, the trial will go ahead on the 17th of July. But that's quite a victory. But the main victory mark is that this second judge, Baroness Arbuthnot, the Chief Magistrate, one of my sources had advised me to look into possible conflict of interest of this judge because her husband is a former Tory MP, James Arbuthnot, Baron Arbuthnot, and he was from 2011 to 2015 the chairman of the Conservative Friends of Israel parliamentary group. And my source couldn't find anything that implicated the judge, but I did. I found 4 photographs of the judge on the Conservative Friends of Israel website on a paid trip to Israel. And that was in February, I think just before I'd left to go to Canada. And we immediately asked the judge to recuse herself, to step down. And last Thursday's hearing was in front of a new judge. So Mrs. Arbuthnot has effectively stood down. She shouldn't have been there in the first place because clearly there's political motivation, maybe even a collusion there. This is the judge who gagged me. This is why from this day on, well, I will respect the terms of the gagging order by not mentioning my accusers and not saying anything racist or anti-Semitic, partly or wholly or grossly offensive. But I really don't think that I've done that in the past, so why would I start now? But that was a grand victory, the recusal of this judge. So now it's in front of District Judge, very experienced jurist, District Judge Zani.
Right. Well, have you ever thought about making a counterclaim against this organisation?
Yes, this was announced on the second bail hearing on the 23rd of December. In fact, my solicitor that was the day he was leaving for 2 weeks holiday, so I was represented by Adrian Davis, barrister, wonderful barrister, and this news was clearly announced to the prosecution in court. Yes, there would be a case brought for damages.
Well, let's see how it goes. We wish you the best of luck with that, Alison.
Thank you very much.
It's a very interesting story, and who knows where it's all leading to.
Who knows? Who knows?
That's it
Fingers
from...
crossed.
Thanks, Alison.
Thanks,
Yes,
Mark.
definitely fingers crossed and everything else. Yes, that's it from this section of Windows on the World in our series of the book burnings and the clamping down of all our rights. We'll see you very soon.
Hear the wood sing. I got my cigarettes, money, guitar too, yeah. Telephone keys, capo and tuna. Driving into town, dark night rain. Staying alone, don't wanna do that again. I wanna hear the woods sing, magical ring. So beautiful, taking me places, remembering way back when the flood and the mislead Jones start to move. Feel the groove. In these times of austerity, yeah, poor folk go without, the rich don't care. Cost of living rising, GCHQ, NSA, controlling lives each and every day. You gotta make your voice heard, say the right word. Ooh, so beautiful. Words are music too. The language of our lives, of the universe. Shout it out, freedom now. Will we ever have those freedoms back with democracy under attack? They're trying to take away our NHS. Well, my reaction, take a guess, and if you're in range, be the change. Ooh, breathe the sacred air. Still no charge for that. The rest's all been sold off. Oceans dying while we stake a claim for personal gain. No one owes a living daily bread, yeah. Earth provides us all warm and fair. We need discussion, good politicians, not a privileged few making the wrong decisions. We need more honesty, accountability. Ooh, let's not hurt each other. Try to share together. Bring an end to all these wars. I don't want to die with the human race in disgrace. So that's why I got my guitar and driving to town. Hope you can join in. Come on down